Okay, well, it's 6 o'clock, and we certainly want to welcome everyone here tonight for this special evening just for educators, the bigger and better future for educators tonight with live with Matthew Kelly. And I'm so excited tonight. We've got just a tremendous amount of people they're still getting on. I was going to ask the question about tell us where you're from, but I've been looking and everyone's doing that in the chat box. So if you keep doing that, that's great. We literally have people from all over the place, from sea to shining sea, which is just phenomenal. So I'm Tony Ferraro. I'm the director of training services and executive coach at Floyd Consulting. And on behalf of our whole team, I'd sure like to welcome you here tonight. Thank you for being with us. It's going to be a great evening, and tonight is all about you. Tonight's not necessarily about your students or lesson plans or your class. It's really all about you. And so this is a special gift to you tonight. We're excited to bring it to you here. A couple things tonight. Just from a housekeeping and technical standpoint, first of all, we just have so many people signed up, and whenever you're doing anything with technology, there's always some challenges that might come along. So I put the odds of everything going well at about 1 in 4 tonight. So we'll see how that goes. But if you are having any difficulty hearing or seeing, we are simulcasting this tonight on YouTube. And you'll see a couple times come up in the chat box a link if you can't hear or see me or Matthew when he comes on, you can jump right over to YouTube at that link that's going to be in the chat box and try it there. That usually solves the problem. So if there is one. But so far, it looks like everything is going great. People are happy to be here. Just one other thing, as when we begin here in just a minute, on your screen, if you notice, and I think it's probably the lower left-hand corner, there's my name and a little box. When we begin here in a moment, and Matthew takes over and starts talking here in a little bit, you can just click on that box of the speaker, and it'll make them full size. So that way, when he's on, you can just have all of his attention there. So I think that's most of the announcements that we have here. I'll let you know that we will be taking questions at the end tonight. So as we're going along, if you think of a question and would like to submit it, just do so in the chat box a little bit later. And we will have some time at the end to get to as many questions as we possibly can. So we are really excited to be able to make sure. Okay, I think that's everything. Those are all the announcements. And so again, welcome to everyone. And first of all, on behalf of our whole team here, thank you. I'm not sure we're saying thank you enough to teachers and school leaders. This past year has been tough enough on everybody. It's taken such a yeoman's effort on the part of teachers. You think of how heroic this has been to be back and either working with students remotely or working with them in the classrooms. And I'm not sure we've said thank you quite enough. So we want to start off with that. Thank you. It's not gone unnoticed on us. Obviously, education has a particular place in my heart. I was an educational leader for about 20 years before coming to Floyd. So I understand pretty much how difficult your job is. So thank you on behalf of our team, but also on behalf of the students and teachers. I'm not sure you hear that quite enough. So with that, tonight is really about helping us to start dreaming again about a future that's going to be bigger and better than the present. It's so easy when things happen in our lives or pandemics or whatever that might be for us to start to stop dreaming. And about 3 years ago, just to give you a bit of history, a little over 3 years ago, Matthew approached me and we talked about possibly putting a program together based on the Dream Manager program that we were doing with our corporate clients just for schools. And so we spent a few months developing that and threw it out there to test it the first August. And we're just completely blown away by the response from schools. So, and we've done it now for 3 years. Each August is hitting the road and doing these presentations live for teachers. We're doing them now in the middle of the year, and the calendar just keeps continuing to fill up. And really, it's been amazing to go from the East Coast to the West Coast and everywhere in between, and having a chance to talk to teachers and help them reconnect with their dreams. We in education, the bell goes off in in August, and it kind of goes off it ends in June, and you're kind of left by yourself. Or if you're the leader of the school, you're in charge of everything. There's not a whole lot of people to talk to, so it can get a little lonely and it can get tough, and we can forget to continue to dream about something that can be bigger and better. And if teachers aren't dreaming, how are we going to affect the next generation of kids? So the experience has been phenomenal being with teachers. I still remember the very first session that we did. A teacher came up to me afterwards and said, I've been at this school for 21 years. It's the first time anyone asked, "How are you?" and really meant it. So it can be isolating. We know that. So tonight is all about you. And I'll tell you, let me just bring this up here. Going around, one of the things we do is we ask teachers in this professional development to figure out and ask the question. So what do you need to let go of? And I put together this little graphic behind me here that get that up here just a moment. Here we go. When we ask teachers, what do you need to let go of? This is a little word cloud we put together, and the bigger the word, the more teachers have been answering that question. Now, the interesting thing about that is I put that together before this past August. So this was pre-pandemic, and this is what teachers and school leaders were struggling with before the pandemic. And so now it's even heightened even more. And that's one of the reasons why we wanted to be here tonight to be with you and help you out in that regard. So this past year, we actually went to schools. I had a full August, traveled through schools. That was an interesting experience. The first place I got off of, this was the headlines in the newspaper when I got off the plane in the airport. So I knew it was going to be quite a challenge. But what we continued to hear from teachers was, how much I needed this. One of our training partner, Sandra, even mentioned at one training, she even stopped it and said, now, you're thinking about your dreams. Isn't it great to be thinking about something else for a change? And how right she was. And as I said, tonight's all about you. And I'm looking forward to what tonight can bring you. And so I'm sure at this point you're quite done listening to me and ready to really hear the main person tonight. And the good news about this, when you're introducing Matthew Kelly, is you don't have to do any introduction. So I'm excited right now to turn the program over to Matthew. And again, there's questions. You have questions, put them in the chat box or responses. We'll do some Q&A at the end. And I'm so looking forward to tonight. I want to thank Matthew ahead of time for being here for this. It's kind of a dream come true for me to be able to do this for teachers. So with that, I'd like to bring on Matthew, and we'll get his video going. And there he is. And take it away.
Great. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, teachers. It's great to be with you. I love teachers. I love educators. I love education, and I see the joy my kids get going to school and learning. And as a parent, there's nothing like that. So I echo what Tony said. I don't think that most people in the community have a real understanding of what educators have been through during the pandemic. And the reality is that most people in the community don't really understand what educators go through even before the pandemic. And so you multiply that, with a global pandemic, and we end up where we are, and we end up what we're dealing with. I wanted to do this event tonight because I've heard from so many of you. I've heard about how you're struggling, how you're suffering, how you are burnt out, how you're tired, and how you want to find new ways to thrive, but you feel stuck in survival mode in many, many cases. I wanted to do this event this evening because teachers have had just an astounding impact on my life. I look at really the incredible life that I've been blessed to have, and I can look back and I can see teachers, I can pinpoint teachers, I can draw the dots all the way back from where I am today, all the way back through my life, to the teachers that have had just enormous impact on me. Many of them formal teachers in school, in the classroom, but some of them informal teachers, coaches, in the sporting arena, on the sporting field, mentors in the workplace. And so I wanted to do this tonight as sort of a thank you to you, as a thank you to teachers, to principals, to educators, and to share some of what we do at Floyd with you, and hopefully bring some perspective to what you're experiencing, and help you to develop a vision for, where do we go from here, which I think is a question we're asking across our culture at the moment, a question we're asking around the world at the moment. Where do we go from here? And that means different things for mothers and fathers. It means different things for educators. It means different things for business leaders. And tonight we want to focus on you as an educator. In my book, The Rhythm of Life, I tell a story about Pablo Picasso. In 20th century, he's probably the most famous artist in the world. And toward the end of his life, he was walking down the street in Paris, and someone asked him to draw a sketch of them. They just noticed him walking in the street, and they stopped him and they said, "Mr. Picasso, would you sketch my portrait?" And Picasso smiled. He said, "Sure." And he sat the woman down in the bus stop and he started sketching her. And in just a few minutes, this enormous crowd gathered, because by that time he was a celebrity. And and he sketched. It took a few minutes to sketch, and he handed the sketch to the woman, and he said to the woman, "That'll be 5,000 francs." And the woman, she laughed and she said, "But Mr. Picasso, it only took you, a couple of minutes." And Picasso said, "My dear lady, you are so wrong. It took me a whole lifetime." And Picasso's point was that he could not separate those couple of minutes where he sat the woman down at the bus stop and made a sketch of her. He could not separate that from the time that he had spent in school, the time he had spent, the hundreds and thousands of hours he'd spent sketching and painting. But he also couldn't separate it from the time he spent with friends and the time he spent reading and studying. And the same is true for an educator. I've thought about this a lot. And every time you walk into a classroom, every time you encounter a student, your whole life has prepared you for that moment. Okay, your whole life has prepared you for that moment. And I think we sometimes separate or compartmentalize different parts of our lives. And in doing so, I think we rob ourselves of the perspective and the experience that is gained. And so I think in order to reconnect with sort of your educator's heart, in order to work out where we're going, we have to have some sense of where we are and where we've come from. And what I know for certain is that everything that's happened to you in your life has prepared you for this next moment, has prepared you for this next league of the journey. And so we have to honor that. We have to honor the things that have happened in our lives, the things that we planned and the things that were unexpected, the things that were predictable and the things that were unpredictable, the things that were enjoyable and the things that broke our hearts. They have all prepared you to be the educator you are today. And I think it's critically important that as we ask ourselves, okay, where do we go from here? I think it's critically important that we be mindful of that. I wrote The Dream Manager in 2006, and it's one of the fastest books I have ever written. I walked the Camino, which is a 500-mile walk from the south of France to the west coast of Spain, and I went walking for almost 30 days. All I did was walk. I didn't take my phone. I didn't take my laptop. I didn't take anything. I just took a backpack and I just walked. And it was a very, very powerful experience. And I'd wanted to write the Dream Manager for some time. I came back and I wrote the Dream Manager in 3 days. I didn't sleep for 3 days. I just wrote. It was a very powerful experience, as a writer, because most of the books I write, they take a year, 2 years, in some case 3 years to get right. But it was, I think the idea had been bouncing around for a while and been talking to a lot of friends about it. And one of the things that had stopped me from writing the book was that I felt that the idea was it was too obvious. It was too simple. And of course, the book went on to become an enormous bestseller and has touched, many, many people's lives really profoundly, wildly beyond my expectations. And yet it is a very simple concept. And if you try to boil the concept down to its most basic form, it's a question. And the question is, what are your dreams? And the follow-up question is, what are you doing about them? But even if you only start with the first question, what are your dreams? The psychology around that is enormous. If you ask people what their dreams are, most people shrug or say they want to win the lottery, or struggle to articulate what their dreams are. And yet we're animated by our dreams. Our dreams bring us to life. They animate us in ways that it's really impossible to put down in words. It's impossible to put on the page. But if you're talking to someone, if you're having a conversation with someone, and they talk about 5 or 6 topics, and one of those topics is their dream or their passion for the future, they literally animate in front of you. They come to life in front of you. Their facial expressions change. Their eyes and their face glow in different ways. The tone of their voice changes. The energy in their voice changes. It's fascinating to watch. And so if we take nothing else away from tonight, I encourage you to start this conversation with as many people as possible. What are your dreams? Some people say, I don't know, I haven't thought about it. The beautiful thing is that the question will stay with them. You ask a person, what are their dreams? The question will stay with them. And they might not have an answer for you now, but they'll go away and they'll be laying awake in bed tonight before they fall asleep, and they'll be thinking, what are my dreams? When was the last time I thought about my dreams? Have I stopped dreaming? When did I stop dreaming? Why did I stop dreaming? And do I still believe in the power of dreams in my life? It's an incredibly powerful question. What are your dreams? The reality is that if we want to have intimacy with people, one of the surest ways, fastest ways to get there is to ask the person about their dreams, to understand what's important to that person, what's important to that person's future. Most people get into bed every night next to somebody, and they don't know what that person's dreams are. They don't understand, okay, what is important to this person now? What is my spouse's dreams for the future? Because we tend not to have this conversation. And I think it's very important to have the conversation. One of the things I've encouraged couples to do for a long time is put together a list of 100 dreams and then go out to dinner and just start talking about dreams. And you might go out to dinner, once a month for a year and just talk about your dreams. And it's amazing how dreams animate relationships. So dreams animate us as individuals. Dreams animate relationships. And life is relationships, which is constantly relating. And so dreams animate communities. A community that has a dream, that has a vision, is animated in a way that a community that doesn't have that is not animated. A classroom, you walk into a classroom, teacher has dream, clear about dream for himself, herself, his students, her students. There's a different energy in that classroom. It's palpable, and everyone picks up on that energy, and it's a beautiful thing. It's a powerful thing. It's a transformative thing, and it's one of the intangibles. It's one of the things we can't take into consideration when we're doing standardized testing and obsessed with this score or that score, or this regulation or that regulation. But it is critically important. It is essential to the educational experience. Like, probably almost every parent in America, I sit down a few times a year with my wife and our children's teachers. And I remember the first time I went to one of these conferences, and the teacher asked me, she said, "Mr. Kelly, what's important to you, in your children's education?" And I said, the most important thing for me is that you collaborate with us as parents to help our children love learning. I believe that if we can help our children love learning, they'll become lifelong learners. They'll become continuous learners, and they will, live a rich life. I said to the teacher, I really don't care if my child is first in the class or last in the class. If my child loves learning, I know that ultimately that will work itself out. And I'm pretty sure the teacher didn't believe me, but I've continued to share this message in pretty much every teacher conference for all of my children over the years. And I talk to my children about it. What's the most important lesson at school? My boy Walter said to me a few weeks ago, and he was like expecting me to say math or, English or history or whatever. And I said, we've talked about it many times. The most important lesson in school is to learn to love learning. And, he's 11 now, so he gives me a little bit of lip about that answer, but he knows that that's where my heart is. And I've just seen it play out in too many people's lives, where people love learning, they learn forever, and they live, rich lives in ways that we cannot even imagine, when we're exposing them to education. And so tonight we come together, not for the students, not for the school, although it will impact that, but firstly and foremostly for you. I think we have an obligation to ourselves, and it is a forgotten obligation. We have an obligation to ourselves, and it's an obligation we often set aside. But before you are a teacher, before you are a mother or a father, a husband, a wife, any of those things, before all of that, you're a human being, you're a person. And in order to build a bigger future, we have to start there. We have to start by honoring the reality that before you're any of those things to anybody else, you are first a unique individual person, human being. And we have to ask ourselves, okay, what does this unique individual human being need in order to thrive? Because the reality is that at the best of times, many people find themselves not thriving, but surviving. They find themselves in survival mode. And of course, you add a global pandemic to that. And we have more people in education and in community, society at large, in survival mode than ever before. And so how do we look to the future when, okay, well, I'm just trying to survive. This dream stuff is just too much. I can't think about the future because I can hardly think about now or tomorrow or the next day. And we'll talk about the dynamics of that and the psychology of that in a minute. But we have to start with, okay, what do you need in order to thrive? Because you're a human being, and one of the beautiful things about human beings is that we have needs. It's a fundamental reality of a human being. You can't set it aside. You can't say, no, I'm not going to be needy. Sometimes people say, oh, that person's needy. Yeah, we're needy. You need to breathe, you need to eat, you need to sleep, you need to hydrate, you need human beings, we just need, and we have legitimate needs. And when those legitimate needs are being taken care of, that's when we tend to thrive. We've got legitimate needs in all four aspects of the human person. So physical, emotional, intellectual, and spiritual. And very often what we will do is we'll let what we can't do interfere with what we can do. And that's what shuts us down. That's what burns us out. That's what shuts us down. That's what puts us in survival mode, makes us feel like, we can't breathe and we can't move forward, is because we let what we can't do interfere with what we can do. And a perfect example of that is, my doctor tells me I should, work out more. And before the pandemic, go to the gym maybe. So 20 minutes to get to the gym, work out for an hour, 20 minutes to get home, take a shower. That's a couple hours. And many days get to a point in my day where I don't have 2 hours for that today. And so I let what I can't do interfere with what I can do. Maybe I can't go to the gym and work out for an hour, but I can go out and walk around for 15 minutes at lunchtime or at the end of the day or first thing in the morning or something like that. And what I want to convince you of tonight is that very small adjustments can have an enormous impact on your psychology, on your physical health, on your spiritual health, on every aspect of your life. We've heard maybe before the idea of a plane that takes off from London headed to New York. If it shifts 3 degrees to the south when it takes off from London, it doesn't land in New York, it lands in Buenos Aires. And so you can see just a tiny little adjustment has taken that plane completely off course. And we often talk about this reality and how easy it is to get off course, but we very rarely talk about this reality on how easy it is to adjust the course to a better course for our life, to a healthier course for our life. And so, tonight is not about like huge, burdensome changes for anybody. Tonight is about, okay, what are some small things that we can do that can have an enormous impact on our lives? The baseline of that is needs. Our lives are built on legitimate needs: physical, emotional, intellectual, and spiritual. To ask yourself, okay, what's one thing I can do in each of those 4 areas that will take less than 15 minutes a day? In some cases, might only take 5 minutes. What's one thing I can do physically, emotionally, intellectually, spiritually each day? If we focus just on that, it's amazing how our attitude changes. It's amazing how we come out of survival mode. It's amazing how we start to breathe. It'll catch our breath. We start to be able to see forward, start to animate in new and exciting ways. And from then we move into this concept of dreaming, of imagining a bigger, better future. In some ways, pain and suffering and turmoil are our servants. They serve us because they force us to look at ourselves, to look at our lives, to look at our world in ways that we wouldn't necessarily if things were going well, if all was well. And so pain and suffering and turmoil and these types of things, of which we're all experiencing to greater or lesser extents in the past year, they are showing the cracks in our lives. They are showing the cracks in our society. They are challenging us to look at ourselves and our lives in new ways. And that may be uncomfortable. That may be awkward. That may be even unwanted. But it is very good for us. It is really powerful. And so what I want to take you through tonight is a little exercise. If you've got some pen or paper, that's ideal. If you want to type some things into the chat bar, that's fine as well as we go through the exercise. I want to take you through what we call a dream-storming session. We do this a lot at Floyd. We do it for a lot of groups for a long time. It's an incredibly powerful experience. It's a very simple experience. I am not that concerned about what dreams you set down tonight on your dream list. We are going to put together a dream list. I am more interested in helping you to get into that mind space, to get into the mind space of dreaming. It is particularly hard when things are not going great, when we feel like we're just surviving, to get into that mind space. And it is a mind space that we have neglected in general as a society for a long, long time now. But one thing is clear if you study history, and that is that everything great in history has been built by people who believe that the future could be bigger than the past. Everything great in history has been built by people who believe that the future could be bigger than the past. Human beings are extraordinary in lots of different ways, and we're endowed with this just incredible abilities and gifts. The first one is life itself. It's an astounding thing, right? I think the second one is free will, the ability to say, yes, I will do this, and no, I won't do that. It's an extraordinary ability. But really close to that, I think, is the ability to dream. It is uniquely human. And it is this ability to look into the future, to imagine something bigger and better in the future, and then come back into the present and work in the present to bring about that bigger future. So it's an extraordinary, it's an astounding ability. And it is one of the most unemployed of all human abilities. We set it aside, we ignore it, we avoid it, we neglect it, we forget about it. And I think that, every aspect of our culture and society at this time needs to dream again. We need to envision a bigger future. We need to ask ourselves, what does that look like? And that's true for you and me. But tonight it's particularly true for you. Come here. Something has brought you here, and so it is particularly true for you. As we go through the dream-storming session, I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions. All I want you to do is jot down your answer. I don't want you to judge your answer. I don't want you to say to yourself, I never have time to do that, or I never have the money to do that, or, my coworkers at school would never help me do that or allow me to do that, or my spouse or significant other would never help me to do that or allow me to do that, or my kids would never cooperate, whatever. When we go into the dream space, I have to set aside the idea of scarce resource, and we spend our lives in a place of scarce resource, because one of the key responsibilities of a leader of any type, whether that's a school principal or a political leader, a business leader, or a parent, one of our roles as leaders is to allocate scarce resource. We only have so much time. We only have so much energy. We only have so much money. We only have so much resources. Every type of resource is scarce. And we have a responsibility to allocate that scarce resource for maximum input, maximum positive effect on our lives and on society. When we're having the dream-storming session, you have to go into unlimited resource idea. You have to set the scarce resource thinking aside, and you have to sort of get into a place where, if anything was possible, what would I do? And what you'll discover as we go through this exercise, it's very hard to stay in that place. It's very hard to stay there, because what happens is we start to dream, we judge our dreams, and then we edit our dreams. And I really want to encourage you not to do that. Just write down whatever comes to your mind. Stream of consciousness. Something comes to your mind, write it down. Don't judge it. Don't edit it. Don't think, I'll never do that. Don't think, I'll never be able to do that. Just write it down. Now, you might come back sometime later and say, okay, that dream doesn't important because these other 3 dreams are more important. That's fine. But for now, the idea is to get the dream down on paper, as many as possible, So I'm going to take you through the exercise now. I'm going to start with some questions to get you sort of into the zone, and then I'm going to move fairly quickly through a bunch of questions. If I move on to the next question and you haven't answered the former question, just move on. Don't try to write the questions down. You won't have a chance. We're going to move so fast, not going to have a chance. I do believe we're recording this evening's presentation and that people will be able to watch it again later. If you wanted to get the questions down, you could do it later, but don't let that interfere with your experience tonight. Just get your answers down. Just write down whatever comes to your mind. If 3 things come to your mind, write 3 things down. If 6 things come to your mind, write 6 things down. When I ask the next question, move on to the next question, even if you haven't answered the previous question. Don't worry about it. Just keep moving. Just move on as we go through the process. The idea here is to help you identify some of your dreams, but more important than that is to develop this concept of dreamstorming and the ability to be people of possibility. Because, one of the things that happens during a crisis is that we become people of impossibility. We become, we can't do that. Why? We're just surviving. We can't add that. We can't add that. We can't improve this. We can't, because we're just in survival mode. In order to build a bigger future, we have to become people of possibility, and not, separated from reality, but to dream is a very healthy thing. It's a very human thing. It does bring us to life, and it is important to envisioning the future. So I'll ask you 3 questions to get started, and I'll take it a little slow in the beginning, and then we'll move fairly quickly after that. The first question is, you get a call tomorrow morning from an attorney that you'd never heard of, who tells you that an uncle you never knew you had has died and has left you $1 billion, billion with a B. If you inherited $1 billion tomorrow, what would you do with the money, and what would you do with the rest of your life? Just jot it down, quick as you can. Don't overthink it. Just jot it down. Inherited $1 billion tomorrow, what would you do with the money, and what would you do with the rest of your life? All right, second question. Second question, you go to the doctor tomorrow, you're feeling perfectly healthy, and the doctor says, let's do a checkup, let's do some tests, let's see how you're doing. Doctor does a bunch of tests, comes back, and she says, I've got some good news and I've got some bad news. You say, all right, well, give me the bad news first. She says, no, I'm going to give you the good news first. You say, all right, well, doc, what's the good news? She says, the good news is you're going to feel perfectly healthy until the moment you die. You say, okay, what does that mean, doc? She says, you're not going to have a degenerative disease. You're going to feel perfectly healthy until the moment you die. And then one day you're just going to drop dead, die in your sleep, whatever. You say, all right, well, what's the bad news, doc? She says, the bad news is 5 years from today, okay, 5 years from today, you are going to die. Here's the question. If you knew with certainty that you were going to die 5 years from now, you knew you were going to be perfectly healthy for those 5 years, but 5 years from now, you're going to die in your sleep, what would you make sure you got done in the next 5 years? Jot it down. If you knew you were going to die 5 years from now, what would you make sure you got done in the next 5 years? Just jot it down. Anything that comes to your mind. All right, question number 3. Question number 3 sounds a lot like question number 2, but it's different. You go to the doctor tomorrow, you're feeling perfectly healthy. Doctor says, let's run some tests and do some checkups, and does some tests, does some checkups, comes back and says, I got some good news and I got some bad news. You say, all right, well, what's the bad news? Doc says, I'll give you the good news first. Good news is you feel perfectly healthy until the moment you die. You say, oh, what's the bad news, doc? The doc says, you are going to die right now. So if you died right now, what would you never get to do that is important to you? What would you never get to do? If you died right now, what would you never get to do that is important to you? So for me, like examples, right? I would never get to see my children grow up. I would never get to walk my daughter down the aisle. I'd never get to see, never get to meet the people my children choose to spend their lives with. I'd never get to meet my grandchildren. All these sorts of things I'd never get to do if I died right now. If you died right now, what is it that you would never get to do that is important to you, very important to you? Jot it down, many things as you come up with. Don't overthink it. Just jot them down. So we're trying to get into this possibility thinking. We're trying to explore sort of the reaches of the human mind and the human heart, the human spirit, and get into this possibility thinking. But we really struggle. I've done this exercise with literally thousands and thousands of people. And to question number 2, you know, if your doctor told you you're going to die 5 years from now, but be perfectly healthy from now until then, in answer to question number 2, nobody has ever said, I'd get a second opinion, which is fascinating to me, because if a doctor said to us, okay, you're going to die, be perfectly healthy 5 years from now, but you're going to die, most of us would be, okay, doc, you're a great doc, but but our mind doesn't naturally go there. Our mind naturally narrows. And the purpose of this exercise is to expand our mind, to broaden our mind, to change the way we think about things, especially the way we think about ourselves and about what is possible in this world for us as human beings. Okay. I'm going to take you through a bunch of questions now. I'm going to take you through really quickly. Jot down whatever you can jot down and just keep moving. Question number 1. If you could travel anywhere in the world, where would you go? If you could travel anywhere in the world, where would you go? Most people, they answer the question literally. They write down one place. They say Sydney, Australia. But the reality is when we're in the possibility thinking, when we're in the dream mindset, we come up with many ideas. We say, oh, I'd love to go to Sydney, Australia. I'd love to go to Paris. I'd love to go to London. I'd love to go to Rome. I'd love to go to Milan. I'd love to go to the Maldives. We tend to constrict that type of thinking because we think, I could never do that. I wouldn't have time. I wouldn't have vacation time. I wouldn't have money, whatever. Don't constrict yourself in that way. Come up with as many answers to as many questions as you can. If you could travel anywhere in the world, where would you go? Question number 1. Question number 2, if you could take a road trip anywhere with anyone, where would you go and who would you take? Okay, if you take a road trip anywhere with anyone, where would you go and who would you take? Now, in answer to this question, most people say, I would take my spouse, or I would take my girlfriend, or I would take my brother, or I would take my grandmother, and we would go wherever. There are almost 8 billion people on the planet now. Sometime later this year, early next year, world's population will reach 8 billion people. Most people immediately narrow the 8 billion down to only the people they know, you know? So most people don't think, wow, I could take a road trip anywhere with anyone I'm going to go road trip down the west coast of Ireland with Bono. It doesn't come into our minds because we don't think of that as possibility. It's not like we could just pick up the phone and call Bono and say, listen, Bono, how about that road trip? And so it just doesn't even enter our mind. But the goal of this exercise is to get our mind into those places of possibilities. So if you could take a road trip anywhere with anyone, where would you go? Who would you go with? If I gave you $1,000 and you had to go out and spend it tomorrow, what would you spend it on? If I gave you $1,000 and you had to go out and spend it tomorrow, what would you spend it on? If you could buy any car, what sort of car would you want? Now, sometimes people say, well, I'm not a car person. I don't really like cars and not really into cars. It doesn't matter. The idea is to get into dream thinking. The idea is to embrace this way of thought. There's going to be questions we go through that you don't care about. They're not important to you. Some people don't like traveling. Some people don't like cars. Cars are not important to them. That's okay. It doesn't matter. But if anything were possible and you could have any car in the world to drive, what sort of car would you drive? Next question is, what's your dream project at home? If you could change one thing about your home, what would you want to change? Maybe you want to redo the kitchen. Maybe you want to clean up the garage or clean up the basement or put in a new bathroom or pick your house up and transport it and put it down by a beach, or I don't know. But if you could change anything about your car, if you could do about your home, one great project on your home, what would you want to do? Next question is, what concert or show or performance would you like to experience in the front row? If you could go to see any live performance and have front row tickets, who would you want to see? What would you want to experience? Next question is, when you think about like the aspects of the human person, physical, emotional, intellectual, spiritual, think about your physical life, your physical being. What would you like to improve? What would you like to improve about your physical life? Next question is hobbies. If you could develop a new hobby, what new hobby would you want to develop? Next question is, if you were going to get involved in an organization, volunteer in that organization, support that organization, what organization would you want to get involved in? Next question is, if you could learn to speak any language other than the languages you currently speak, what language would you want to learn? Next question is, what one relationship would you like to improve in your life? If you could improve one relationship in your life, which relationship would you want to improve in your life? The next question is, what one skill or ability would you like to possess that you don't currently possess? What's one skill or ability that you would like to learn, to possess? Next question is, if you could have lunch with any living person, who would you want to have lunch with? If you could have lunch with any living person, who would you want to have lunch with? Next question is, if you didn't have any fear, what activity would you try? Would you go skydiving? Would you go parasailing? Go deep sea fishing? Would you go scuba diving? I don't know. If you didn't have any fear, what activity would you try? Next question is, what character trait would you most like to develop in yourself? Would you like to become more patient, more courageous, more generous, more conscious, more aware? Next question is, if you could learn to play any musical instrument, what musical instrument would you like to play? Next question is, if you could change something about your workspace or the environment you work in, what would you change? If you could change something about the workspace, the environment you work in, what would you change? I have a friend tells a great story. His father worked at the same business for 43 years, and when he retired, he took his father out to dinner with his siblings, and his sister asked the father, "Dad, you worked there for 43 years. What do you wish would have been different?" And her father said, "I wish they would have given me a more comfortable chair." And it's tragic, right? It's like this guy's 43 years, and this is his takeaway. This is the one thing he would have wanted to be different: a more comfortable chair. And the truth is, probably nobody knew that he needed or wanted a more comfortable chair. If you could change one thing about your workspace, what would it be? If you could eliminate one personal habit that is self-destructive or stopping you from becoming the best version of yourself, what self-destructive habit would you like to eliminate in your life? What quality would you like to be remembered for? What quality? If you could only be remembered for one quality, what quality would you like to be remembered for? We've been through a bunch of questions, and the idea is to get people dreaming. As we've gone through it, you've probably thought about other dreams, things that you would like to do, things that you would like to have, and a person you'd like to become. The process is critically important. It's so enriching because it gets us thinking about ourselves differently. It gets us thinking about our life differently. It gets us thinking about what is possible. And very often we're told what is not possible. We live in a world where very often it is a world of challenge, of struggle, of difficulty, and of impossibility. And in the midst of that, we're trying to find, what are the possibilities and how can we explore those possibilities? I encourage you over the next few days to continue to make a list of your dreams. The 12 areas we talk about, when it comes to dreams, talk about physical, emotional, intellectual, spiritual. We have dreams in all of those 4 areas. We have dreams psychologically, if you could overcome any fear, what fear would you like to overcome? We have dreams materially, maybe you want a new house or a new home or a new handbag or a new pair of shoes or a new watch or whatever. We have dreams professionally. What's your dream job? Maybe you're in your dream job, but what is the dream makeup of that job? Financially, we have dreams. Maybe you want to save a little bit more, put away 401k, that sort of thing. Creatively, what are your creative dreams? Adventure, what are your adventure dreams? Legacy, what are your legacy dreams? I mean, as an educator, your life is rich in legacy. You're not aware of it. Almost never hear about the impact you have on people's lives, but you have enormous impact on people's lives. You're creating astounding legacy. And then the 12th area of dreaming is character. So what are our character dreams? Do we want to be more patient? Do we want to be more honest? Do we want to be more generous, more compassionate? These sorts of things. But in the coming days and weeks, I really encourage you to expand your dream list and to try and come up with a list of 100 dreams. Seems daunting. It isn't daunting. I can tell you for certain, if you come up with a list of 100 dreams, you put the dreams in an envelope, seal the envelope, put it in a drawer, open that envelope 3 years from now without even having looked at it again, you'll be amazed how many of those dreams you have moved forward or how many of those dreams you've accomplished. There's something about the exercise that just is very, very powerful unto itself. Of course, I don't recommend that you put the list in a drawer for 3 years and don't look at it. I recommend you look at it. I recommend you look at it once a week. I recommend you spend some time going through it and asking yourself, okay, well, what are the most important dreams for the next 12 months or the next 3 years or the next 5 years? Our coaches at Floyd, our executive coaches, our business coaches, our life coaches, all of our coaches at Floyd are constantly encouraging people to think about, okay, what's one dream or 3 dreams you want to accomplish in the next 12 months? What's a couple of dreams you want to accomplish in the next 5 years? And what a couple of dreams that are longer term than that you want to accomplish, they're going to take 5 years or more. So really encourage you to put together a list of dreams, spend some time with the dreams, and start the conversation with as many people in your life as possible. Ask the people in your life, what are their dreams? I think it's a beautiful thing to do with your students. I think to take some time one day, sit down with your students and say, hey, what are your dreams? Or even put a dream board up in the classroom where people can put up, my dream is to run a 5K. And then when they run a 5K, they take a picture of themselves running the 5K and they put that up on the dream board. We see this in businesses all the time. We encourage businesses to do this all the time. Maybe as a staff, you want to do that in the staff room at school or in the lunchroom at school for the teachers, or one of the teacher spaces. You put up a dream board and different teachers put up their dreams, and then when you accomplish the dreams, you put a photo of you accomplishing the dream, or magazine article about a dream or whatever. And these dream boards become, just really magical in many, many ways, a source of great conversation, great energy, great encouragement, and great enthusiasm. The secret to eternal youth is enthusiasm, and dreams keep us young. Okay. When we look at where we are as a culture, when we look at what we're dealing with in the midst of this pandemic, when we look at how so many of us have been dragged into survival mode, what have we lost? We've lost our enthusiasm. And so one of the questions we have to ask ourselves is, how do we get our enthusiasm back? How do we get our enthusiasm back? And one of the ways, we're going to talk about others in a question and answer. I've seen some of the questions coming in, and so we're going to be able to talk about some other ways. But one of the ways we keep young, one of the ways we keep our enthusiasm high is by envisioning the future, is by dreaming. And so I encourage you first, for you, before you're a teacher, before you're a mom, before you're a dad, before you're a husband, before you're a wife, before you're anything else, you're a human being. And so first, this is for you, and for you to get back in touch with your dreams and ask yourself, what is most important to you at this time in your life? What are your dreams for the future? Even if a dream has to be 3 years from now or 5 years from now, it can bring incredible energy to your life right now. I say to the team every year in December, I say, I want you to plan at least half your vacation days for next year. I want you to plan them in January. Why? Because half of the joy, the pleasure of a vacation is the anticipation of that. And so even if a dream has to be set in the future, 3 years, 5 years, the anticipation of that dream, working towards that dream, animates us in very, very powerful ways. Many people, you'll have this experience tonight, and then you'll say, all right, that was great, but what's next? There's lots of next. There's lots of resources at Floyd, on Floyd's website. We'll send you some information about that. If you haven't read The Dream Manager, encourage you to read The Dream Manager. Have the conversation. Talk to your friends about this. Talk to your significant other about this. Reconnect with your dreams and help them to reconnect with their dreams. And then, obviously Floyd offers a lot of things for schools, for educators. Tony and the team do incredible in-service days around this concept of building a bigger future. How do we do it as individuals? How do we do it as a school? How do we do it in the classroom? There's some great trainings available. There's some great in-service days that we put on. So if you want to bring something like this to all the teachers or all the staff at your school, encourage you to get in touch with Floyd, sometime, and we will help put that together for you. I'm going to have Tony now tee up a video, which is going to run just for a couple of minutes. And then I'm going to come back and I'm going to answer questions, going to answer as many as we can. I know there's a bunch, and this is probably my favorite part of the thing. I just love answering your questions. So if you've got a question, pop it in the box. I know some of you submitted questions before the event. Tony's got those. He'll lead us through it. But I'll pass it back to you, Tony, to the video, and then we'll come back for Q&A.
Awesome. Thank you, Matthew, so much. Listen, if you just the time we had tonight so far, if you feel a little more engaged or energetic about what you're doing, if you maybe want to put a yes or a thumbs up in the chat box, that would be great. And as we start this video, I would ask you to think about one more dream. If you're a teacher, what would your days look like if all of your coworkers had the same energy that you have tonight thinking about their dreams? And if you're a school leader, what would your staff look like if everyone was engaged in their dreams? Well, we do offer a program here for schools, one of several. I'm going to hit this video here and you can start seeing this. And again, we'll do question and answers right after this. Think about your best teacher. That special teacher that's incredibly engaged, not in just their work, but it seems like in their entire life. They have an endless supply of energy. They're positive and creative, a great coworker, and the kids just seem to gravitate toward them. Now, imagine if every teacher at your school was just like that teacher. How would your school be different? How would your faculty meetings be different? How would your classrooms be different? How much better would your entire school culture be? Just have one question as you start this school year for you, your family, and your students. That's real simple. What's your dream? All you have to do if you have your cell phone to participate is type in an answer and hit send on this number, and we'll see your response. Over a decade ago, Matthew Kelly wrote The Dream Manager, a true story about a company that completely turned around the engagement level of their employees by helping them get engaged in their own lives first, by reconnecting them to their dreams in every part of their lives. A few years ago, Matthew challenged our team at Floyd Consulting to create a similar program specifically for schools. And as someone with almost 20 years of experience in educational leadership, the thought of bringing the same program to schools that top businesses have been utilizing for years made this project the most exciting I've ever worked on. You may be in that situation. You may be writing these dreams and going, yeah, I'm writing these down, but my marriage is this, my kids are this, my job, whatever it is, it's right in front of me. So some of the time, dreams are about doing the next right thing, stopping the bleeding, moving forward, because there is a future that's bigger and better than the present. The school exists for the teachers. They will carry out your mission. As the leader of the school, you have very little way of carrying out the mission of your school except through your teachers. This high energy, interactive 90-minute program helps teachers become more engaged in their work by helping them become more engaged in their own lives, by seeing a future that's bigger and better than the present.
That is awesome. It's very engaging. It's good to be reminded to always dream and think about your dreams, because I feel like we get so caught up in the hustle and bustle.
Are the students who leave your class better or worse? They're going to be one or the other. None of your students are going to come into your class and be exactly the same as when they left.
How do I become a better husband, a better dad, a better teacher, a better person? I think it's one more thing that sort of helps me process and put all that together and to hopefully strive to become a better person every day.
So if you want to find out what your school would be like if every teacher was your best teacher, sign up for a consultation today. But don't wait. Our schedule's already filling up. So go ahead. Dream about a bigger and better future for your school, where every teacher is your best teacher. Okay, I apologize. I think there was a little echo there, but on the right of your screen, if you are a teacher and would like to get some more information for your principal, you can click on that button that says Connect with Floyd, and we will get that scheduled right away. If you're a school leader, do the same thing, and we can schedule a call right away to get this professional development scheduled at your school right away also. So go ahead and click that button. With that, we've got some questions. And let's see, are we good here? So we'll start. Okay, Matthew, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, great. So this first question is actually from a set of questions, and you've started to ask it, but maybe if we can focus on maybe like one next step. So Aaron mentioned, do you have any recommendations on how to gain strength each day when it feels like Groundhog Day over and over again? And Letitia said something similar, which said, how do you think about dreaming when you're face down in the dirt trying to survive when challenges seem to be kicking our behind? So what's the first step?
Yeah. So, I think very often our first dreams, our first steps are in our questions, and so in both of these scenarios, what are we dreaming of? We're dreaming of not being in survival mode. We're dreaming of getting out of survival mode. And, what is it that puts us in survival mode? Many things. What is it that keeps us in survival mode is usually a feeling of being overwhelmed. Okay. And when we're overwhelmed, usually what happens is that it's not what we have to do right now that is overwhelming us, but we start to compound and conflate later today, tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. We start to look at all of these extensions, both in our personal life and our professional life. And when we start to look at all of that, then we become overwhelmed. And when we get overwhelmed, we get paralyzed. Okay. And then inaction shuts us down even more. Inaction, like whoever said, puts our face in the mud, or inaction is what, makes us feel hopeless. And so if we say to ourselves, okay, if I feel like I'm overwhelmed, if I feel like I'm just in survival mode, what is it that's driving that feeling? And then to ask ourselves, okay, is it what I actually have to do today? Most of the time it is not. Sometimes at this point in a scenario like the one we're in, it is, but it is not actually what we have to do today, but it's that we lack the energy or the enthusiasm, or we don't feel like we have the right support at home or at school to do what we need to do today. So I think the first thing is identify, are we overwhelmed by what's going on today, or are we compounding and conflating future realities into today that's overwhelming us? Either way, we have to ask ourselves, what's the first step, the tiniest step forward that can get us there? I went to Colorado 10 years ago with some friends, climb a mountain, and I got 1,000 feet from the top, and I just felt like I just couldn't go on. And these other hikers, they came past, and there's one woman, she stopped. She got about 5 or 6 feet past me, and then she stopped. I sat down on this rock, and she stopped about 5 or 6 feet past me, and she turned around and she said, if you just keep putting one foot in front of the other, you will get there. And it was like it's stupid obvious, right? If you take one step at a time, you will get there. It doesn't matter how long it takes to get there. You will get there. And I got back up and I got to the top of Mount Elbert. But the reality is that when we feel like we're stuck in survival mode, we feel overwhelmed, we get paralyzed into inaction. And once we start to act, once we work out, what's one small thing I can do to move this thing forward or rectify this thing, our whole mood, our whole being changes. And so we have to identify that. And, as we talked about earlier in the session, don't let what you can't do interfere with what you can do. If you feel like, okay, I have to do this big thing, what's the one tiniest little iteration of that can get you started?
Yep. Awesome. So if you take that step, we all know we work in communities, we work with people. Gene asked this question. So how can we best manage doing this when our coworkers want to be so negative?
Yeah. So, I think negativity is enormous in our culture now. I think it's tied to, I think the social media phenomenon has brought a lot of negativity into our lives and into our world. And I think that you have to be on guard against that. You have to decide, okay, if I don't have to spend time with a negative person, I'm not going to spend time with a negative person. But you also cannot allow these other people to determine the direction of your life, to determine your destiny. I mean, depending on the level of the toxicity, you either have to avoid the toxicity, Or if it is rampant, you have to go somewhere else where your gifts and talents will be appreciated, and you feel like, you're not slugging through mud to serve people powerfully each day. And because at the end of the day, I mean, what teachers do is a beautiful thing. I mean, it's an astoundingly beautiful service to humanity, not just to the children in the room, but to humanity. And it shouldn't be as hard as we make it. And we make it hard for teachers in lots of ways. Politically, we make it hard. Parents make it hard. Other teachers, other people in school make it hard. We make it hard for teachers in ways. And so as a teacher, you do have to protect yourself. You do have to keep that light within you burning, and burning strong as possible. And if that means avoiding certain people, then I think you need to do that.
Awesome. A lot of teachers have gone from not only just being a teacher in their classroom, but then when kids are home and remote, they've been their teacher, and they've got a spouse who's got their job. We've all got all this balancing to do. So Catherine writes, how can I balance the demands of my professional, personal, and prayer life? It seems like I can only do one well, and then the others suffer. I feel like I am constantly letting others and myself down because I'm not giving my personal best to everything at once.
Yeah. So I'm not sure I accept the premise of the question or the underlying assumption that you can only do one well. I think that if you look at the work-life balance conversation, that I wrote about in my book, Off Balance, I think that our culture has perpetuated this lie that you can be successful at work, but it's going to cost you personally, or you can be successful personally, but it's going to cost you professionally. And I don't accept that. I think that we have to find ways that we can experience high levels of satisfaction personally and professionally. Now, that being said, we're in an abnormal scenario. So that's what I would say during a normal scenario. I would say, okay, how's your personal satisfaction? Give yourself a score between 1 and 10. How's your professional satisfaction? Give yourself a score between 1 and 10. Score yourself every week, once a week at the same time for a year. And what will happen is both of those numbers will improve because they'll drive intentionality. We'll start thinking about the things that bring us satisfaction personally, bring us satisfaction professionally, rob our personal or professional satisfaction. Just scoring that one thing will just bring us intentionality. There's a whole number of factors at play today that they're not normal. They're not going to be around forever, and they're not normal. And so you have to realize that that you're sort of in a war, and if you're in a war, you think about, okay, what are the ways that you can lose a war? The number one way to lose a war is if you're in a war and you don't realize you're in a war. You are absolutely going to lose that war. You think about what parents experience with children at different times. It's a war. That's just the reality. It's a war. Now, you can tell yourself it's not a war, but if you tell yourself it's not a war, you will lose that war, because the number one reason people lose wars is because they don't realize they're in a war. And I think that that's what's going on in our society. We want normal. You can't have normal right now. What you can have is the best you can work out in a war, And if you think about any war in history, it changes the culture. It changes what people are able to do. It changes what people value. It changes what's important to people, So why do we lose a war? We lose a war because we don't know we're in a war. Second reason we lose a war, we don't have a strategy. Okay. So if your strategy for the war is to try and live life like it used to be, you're going to lose that war as well. And then the third reason people lose wars is they don't have, supplies. They aren't able to get food to the troops, or they don't have troops, or whatever it is. And so I think we have to come into a very different mindset. And I'm using war because it's a radically different mindset, but I'm using that to sort of shock us into thinking about it differently, because I don't think we're thinking about it differently. I think we're trying to force an old paradigm into a new reality that won't take that paradigm. And so we're getting crushed, because anytime we have an illusion or a delusion, now they are different and we have both, all of us, but anytime we have an illusion or a delusion, and that illusion or delusion comes up against reality, either we will come in line with reality or we will experience pain and suffering, heartache, heartbreak. We will get crushed. We'll either allow reality to crush our illusion or we will be crushed. And I think in our environment at the moment, we're not allowing reality to crush our illusions. We're not aligning ourselves with the reality. But again, I come back and say, okay, what are the small things you can do each day in each of those aspects, as a mom, as a teacher, but firstly for yourself. That's the forgotten obligation, our obligation to ourselves. If we don't tend to our legitimate needs in some way, we are going to struggle in every other aspect of our life.
Very good. This one I think is a quick one. I'm sure other people have thought the same thing. It happens every time when we're doing dream storming, particularly when we talk about material dreams. Melinda mentioned, so how do you reconcile dreaming big, material dreams, wanting things, and this sense of we're not supposed to want things, or is that materialistic, or she said Catholic guilt, but however you want to place it.
Yeah, I mean, we get this question all the time. God created this world for us. He put amazing things in this world for us. I think there is a balance, that has to be sought. I think that, do we own things or do things own us is one. I often talk about the idea, if you're not free to say no, you're not free to say yes. And I think it's important for us to measure that from time to time. I think one of the things I think about is that, my wants are not more important than anybody else's needs. Okay. And it's a really tough thing to struggle with, because I like things. I like beautiful things. I like nice things just like anybody else. But the reality is that if my next door neighbor's child was starving, I wouldn't go out and buy a new pair of, running shoes. I would get that child some food, and my next door neighbor's child isn't starving, but I don't have to go too many miles to find the child that is. But I also think you can get into a radical space there, and then you don't enjoy life and the world and the things that God created for us and wants us to enjoy. So I think that, somewhere in the middle, something that's reasonable and not extreme, I think is the place that we should end up on most things.
Awesome. Okay, we just got a couple more. I'm going to put these two together. Obviously, what we do is coaching, so this caught my eye. Actually, the first part of this question came from Ricardo in Mexico, and his question was, how do we help our students by being a coach, by coaching, helping them achieve the best version of themselves? And then the follow-up to that is, which we see in coaching a lot, if you could comment on it. Jennifer mentions it. So what do you do when you want the students to succeed more than they do?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, as people read The Dream Manager, we discover that we're all dream managers. Formally or informally, we're all dream managers. And it really is an approach to relationship, and it is a coaching approach. It's like, how do I coach the people in my life to help them grow, to help them thrive, to help them become a better version of themselves each day? As you mentioned, Tony, I mean, when we're training coaches, one of the things we have to drill into the coaches is, you are going to want your people dreams, you're going to want them more for them than they want them for themselves. And of course, this is a situation that teachers find themselves in all the time, just as parents do. And so what we train our coaches, you have to move in lockstep with the person. You can't take 5 steps and tell the person, come on, catch up now. You have to, it's okay to lead. It's okay to take a step forward, but to really prescribe, okay, I need you to take this step now, or you need you to take this step now. And then when they take that step, then you take the next step. The reason it's so important, and we talk to our coaches about this all the time, is because as a teacher, you want to create empowerment, not entitlement. As a coach, our coaches want to create empowerment, not entitlement. And if you get too far ahead of people, then they become overly dependent on you, and it creates a scenario of entitlement rather than empowerment, and none of us want to pass that on to our kids, whether they're our students or our children. We want to empower the people in our lives to go out and have a rich experience of life and the adventure of life, and grow in character and virtue and become a better version of themselves.
Awesome. Okay, so we're going to do our last question here. Before I do that, I just want to mention to everyone that we will be sending out a link for the replay. The questions come up a lot, so you'll get a link for the replay to watch that. So the last question here. This is from some of our school leaders. Lisa writes this. So I'll add the first part. In addition to having us come and do an in-service, as a building principal, what action steps do you recommend to best support staff with their mental health outlook, boost their positivity, and still stay on the path of doing action steps, which can be time consuming, so that they can best help our students?
So I'll give some thoughts here, Tony, but I also encourage you to share a couple of thoughts. Obviously, you're a principal for a long time, and I think that you have expertise here that I don't have. The thing I would say is that, as a leader, the burden of leadership is enormous. So firstly, to be mindful of, okay, how is it affecting you? If you understand how it's affecting you, you'll develop the emotional intelligences around empathy and compassion, et cetera, for how it's affecting the teachers, how it's affecting the staff at the school, and how it's affecting the students and the parents. And then you have the whole community. So I think it really is about developing this sort of compassion, empathy, that people are in a tough spot. I think people are psychologically fragile in a way that they're not even aware of. I think, as we come out of the pandemic, I think people are going to realize they're, more broken than they perhaps thought they were. I think that's going to come out as they get back to what we would call normal activities. And a lot of that is going to come to bear on schools, because kids are going to come to school. They're going to bring that to school with them, whatever their experience is, but they're also going to bring part of whatever their parents are experiencing to school. Teachers are going to bring that to school. And of course, as a principal, you're going to bring that to school. I've never seen educators work harder. I know the schools that we were in last summer. Many of these educators working 10 hours a day all the way through the summer, to get the school ready. I know principal where my kids go to school and the teachers where my kids go to school, they were just there all summer. And it was a Herculean effort. I think people are incredibly grateful, but at the same time, it's a time where people are very caught up in their own self and their own need, and so they're not necessarily expressing that gratitude. And so I think as a principal, I just encourage you to be mindful of, okay, what are your needs? What are your teachers' needs? And what's essential? What are luxury items, and what is actually essential? And let's get focused in on the essentials, and not distracted by things that would be nice to do or nice to have or whatever. But with that, Tony, I'll pass it back to you and let you answer that question a little bit.
Well, it's interesting, as you always say, people are people. Just this past week, so I'm doing some executive coaching, CEO, millions of dollars coming through the company, a set of problems. doing some executive coaching with principals. Principal, not millions of dollars coming through the school. Similar, almost identical set of problems, because the reality is most problems for leaders are who problems and not what people or what problems. So we always say, who does the school exist for? And the school exists for the teachers, and the teachers will carry out your mission. As a school leader, perhaps the only way you have to effectively carry out the mission of your school is through your people. You're one person, you got your staff. So I think the investment into people right now is always important. I think it is so vital at this point. As you said, people working, teachers are on 14 months right now, as principals in particular are on 14 months of constant working. And it's naive to think that what's going on in regular time in a teacher's personal life doesn't affect their teaching. Right now, it's just exponentially more important. So investment in your people is always important right now. If we don't invest in our people in schools, I'm not sure what the result's going to be, because it's unsustainable the way we're going right now. So as always, it's just invest in your people. The school can only be the best version of itself to the extent that the teachers are the best versions of themselves. So I've just seen that play out time and time again, that it's just all about your people. And that's the one thing you can do as a leader, is invest in your people.
Fantastic. Love it.
Yep.
Thank you, everyone, for being with us. I'll let Tony give the final sign off, but keep up the great work. We love you. Educators, teachers, our kids need you desperately. Our culture, society needs you. Underpaid, underappreciated, but we love you here at Floyd, and we hope that tonight has brought you some hope, has lifted your heart, your spirits, and allow you to focus in on your future in a new way.
Awesome. Thank you, Matthew. So that's it tonight. We're going to, again, you can still click on that button if you want to talk to a Floyd coach about bringing the program to your school. The replay will be coming out. We're going to get to, if there's any other questions, our team will go through and answer those. So on behalf of Matthew, who I greatly appreciate being here tonight, and our whole Floyd team, again, thank you. God bless you. And we look forward to working together. Thank you for what you're doing. Good night, everybody.